Good morning and welcome to the AutoHub show. We're going to start with an interview with Numa.ai. Here we go.
You also want to have that full transparency so that you know what's being said, right?
So the correct AI experience versus the incorrect AI.
Well, I'm not even going to say incorrect. I'm just going to say best practice.
Right. All right.
Because it's not going to change. It will change the customer experience if you keep improving your AI, right? If you're driving the AI to be better, what it'll do is protect you internally. That's a critical thing. That's where I'm going.
So with Numa, then are you able to provide that transcript of that interaction for a dealer?
Any interaction with our AI, whether it's voice chat or text, right, is completely transparent. They have the call recording, they have the voice transcription, they have any of the text messaging, any of the chat messaging, everything's there. And I was kind of tooting our own horn a little bit, but we know when the AI gets outside of the parameters and it's going to escalate it to a human. Okay. It's actually going to come back and say, hey, I think I know what they're asking. This is my suggestion. I need a human to approve it.
Right.
At that point in time, the human can say yes and send it, or they can say no, and they can cancel that, and then they can get involved with the transaction.
So kind of like at the boiler when they have to get help for that question and answer session. Is that what you mean?
Exactly. We have reached the point of the connection where we're going to do a little bit more of an observation here.
Yeah, we got a couple of questions that unfortunately this gentleman or lady can't answer. Is that what you mean? I understand.
Yeah. I'm tagging in a team member.
Yeah, tag team, tagging out.
It's back again.
I'm tapping out.
Oof, there.
So what are you hearing at the show from dealers? I mean, I know that there's a lot of discussion about AI, and obviously dealers are always looking for new technology that can help them. What are you hearing from dealers in terms of why they're looking for that, and what feedback they've had if they've been using it, as in terms of your clients? So what are you hearing at the show?
Yeah, so I think the first part of that is twofold, right? So one of the things that we're really focused on is driving efficiencies for the staff at the dealership.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes AI gets delivered as this is a product that's going to replace people. Sure, it could happen.
Yeah.
But the reality is, what we want to do with our AI is we want to enhance the employee's ability to perform their job, right? Be more efficient, and they can do more. Right. That's the goal. Right. That's what we want to do.
So that's a little piece of the interview with Numa.ai. You can check it out on our YouTube channel from 2024. There was a lot of talk about AI at SEMA, NADA this year. And there was also a great interview for the Tim Hayden fans out there. We interviewed Tim on the same topic, sort of, not specifically on a product, but it was specifically about AI, and because that was sort of the big thing at the show. Anyway, here we go.
Right.
Tony Lynn, I'm the general manager of Fred Bean's Kia in Lanark. I just wanted to take a minute to talk about Larry Feldman, Career Changers USA. Larry and I have been working together for about the last 12 years now, and anything I've ever needed as far as recruiting, training, Larry has been right there. Larry's got me salespeople, he's got me managers, he's got me technicians, even through the toughest times in the industry. And he is just the kind of guy who's going to tell you exactly what's on his mind. He's going to tell you exactly what he thinks. But Larry also has the expertise to back it up. When he was in the dealership world, he was a top performer. And that's really important to my staff, especially as it pertains to training. A lot of people can come in and teach out a textbook, but Larry has real world experience dealing with customers, dealing with situations in dealerships that we go through on a daily basis and try to train on. But Larry's been through it, so he can really empathize with the people and tell you what's worked for him and maybe what way not to go. Larry is just always at a 10. I mean, his energy level is always up there. And I think people, they just love that and they feed off of it. He's not faking it. He is genuinely excited to come in and help you. He's excited to come in and help grow your business. And he's one of those people who just really enjoys seeing dealers succeed and have a lot of fun at the same time.
Life is about connection. Having a support system to lean on. And roads to endless possibility. At every turn, guiding the way, we are building the connections that move you.
So what would your dealership feel like if your entire sales staff was literally on fire, your sales and service staff, nonstop all over social media, completely dominating your marketplace? They could do it in 30 days or less and then continue their education to do it for an entire 6 months or a year. You literally would completely take over the entire marketplace and no one would be able to compete with you. And that's what we can do for you. So when you're walking around your community, whether you're at local restaurants or you're going to the gym, you don't want to be bothered? Fine, you won't be bothered. But a lot of people will walk up to you and say, oh my God, I love your social media. Your staff is amazing. We love what you're doing in the community. We want to come buy a car from you. We want to get an oil change at your dealership. Your community is absolutely going to love you. And it doesn't matter what platform you're on. You could be on TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all social media platforms. You will literally be all over the place. And not only will you have ads running, but your own staff is going to be promoting your brand and promoting themselves within the dealership and within the business. So it's like running an ad times 100-fold because your entire staff is participating in the process. I've traveled all over North America. I've trained Toyota. I've trained Nissan. I've been to driving sales. I've been to Women in Auto. I get hired as a speaker for conferences at universities all over the country. And I can help change the trajectory of your dealership right now.
Good morning and welcome, and thanks for the to our sponsors for obviously making the show possible, and a special welcome to our guests. We have Carl and of course Tim. So why don't we start with Carl, because I think Carl is new to the show. So why don't we start with Carl? At the end of the day, the question I have after you introduce yourself is, what's the best way for automotive dealers to use data in their business? So go ahead, Carl.
Yeah. Yeah. So, guys, thanks for having me on. Enjoy your show, and glad to be on and ramble a little bit, and hopefully have some fun doing it. My background: I'm a former military guy. Went to the Air Force Academy, played football there. So there may be some football references in the discussion today. But I spent some time in the military. Did a lot of very interesting things. I was in the financial side, but they transitioned out, still did a lot of government work, but worked for some of the combatant commanders like NORAD, NORTHCOM, and also the Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Science and Technology. And really looking at what emerging technology was available that we could expedite to the warfighters. You know, that process usually takes 7 to 10 years or even longer. And how do we do it in 6 months? So it was probably the most rewarding job I ever had. But fast forward years later, and now we're always looking for innovative ways, new technology that's out there to either optimize business, protect business, etc. So that's what we do now as the CEO of a company called BotDoc. It's a cybersecurity software company.
Fantastic. Without further ado, we have Mr. Tim Hayden, who's been on the show multiple times. Tim, tell us a little bit more about what you do, and also what's the best way for automotive dealers to use data in their business?
Well, Ian, thanks for having me back, and it's great to meet Carl. Appreciate the time we had right before we recorded, just to get to know each other. Things have changed in all the times I've been on this show. A lot has changed, right? And we're at what I would say is a pivotal inflection period of change, right? It is iterative. It's not a slope. It's not something that Gartner or Forrester or anybody else is going to be able to put in a quadrant or a graph and make it a product, right? And try to get everybody to move in one direction or another. So what I'm starting to answer the data question without saying what we do. Let me say that real quick. A year and a half ago, a year ago, you knew us for customer data platforms, right? And the thing that was different about what we were doing and what a lot of the native auto CDPs do is we were looking at 100% of the data in the organization. We were looking at bridging the gap between fixed ops and variable ops. There's a lot more that goes into it than that, but it was that thing. We're still doing that today, but as the CDP market has gone composable, what does that mean? It means that you can have a modular approach to building your performance marketing operation. As that's happened, we are basically helping dealers in a post-CDK world, and I'm sure we'll unpack that, to have 100% backup of all their information across the organization and to be able to leverage it real-time in operations, which brings us to what can they do with data. And the thing I like to look at best is they can put all their data to work, every bit of it to work. Every dealer we get a chance to work with are a bit, I would say, on their heels when we first mentioned the fact that we can wake up their dark data and help them reach customers that they haven't seen in 6, 8, 10 years, because that data exists somewhere in the organization. They can certainly capitalize on converting repeat purchases and building lifetime value by having the customers that they know come back again and again and again. Data can do all these things for them. And of course, it's what dealers know very well is it can also show them all the customers they don't know. They can show us things about them. And it's what dealers naturally have done, is just kind of live at the top of the funnel. So I'll probably stick with the first part of that, which is let's talk about everything that's there, which is also a cybersecurity vulnerability. The data that you're not using, that you don't have going through your pipes in real time. But there's much more you can do with data. Those are just a couple of the things.
Thanks very much. And our latest arrival, Mr. Groden, tell us a little bit more about what you do and what your opinion is on data and automotive dealers and what's the best way for them to use data in their business.
Is it data or is it data? It's the old like Star Trek. Hey, everyone. I think, Tim, we've met before. I think we've been on this show before.
Yeah, Ian has brought us together before, yes.
Yes. Carl, I don't think I know you, but it's good to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet
you. So I spent nearly a decade in the automotive ad sales team at Google, and now I do a bunch of different things. Among the things I do is I teach at the Automotive Business School of Canada, mostly in the space of digital marketing. And I also do a bit of consulting with a few different partners, a few different things across a bunch of different kinds of business, still automotive or automotive adjacent. The state of data, I don't know what in a word bad would that be? Can we just say it's bad? I'm sure you already touched on this, but we've heard the horror stories of dealers who have moved, right, and then do things like throw out filing cabinets full of entire purchase histories that were never digitized, and leave that in a landfill somewhere, which is appalling for a wide number of reasons. A, it's an asset that they're just throwing away. B, the opportunity for someone to capitalize on that data, to steal it, leverage it, compromise personal information of other people that's the easiest way to do it. They don't even have to hack. They just have to go pick it up. And you look at, I think about the whole, I know they're sponsors, so we won't trade into the mud too far, but the CDK situation, in my opinion, that's kind of tip of the iceberg. I mean, the reason they were a good target for ransomware was that somebody realized Automotive is sitting on a huge, like General, whether we want to talk OEM or dealer or both, sitting on an entire massive, oil field equivalent of data that includes, PII as well as financial data. And that makes it a prime target, and it's not protected as well as it is at the banks. And at the banks, there are still vulnerabilities. So I don't think this will be the last breach. I think this may be one of the biggest public we hear about for a little while, but if somebody realized, yeah, there's data out there that we could be capitalizing on, and so let's go steal it because they're not paying attention to it. I hope that was a wake-up call. I don't think it is. I feel like I find, there are two reactions to that situation. And one is, but they're still a great partner. I'm going to continue to use them. And the other is, they're a great partner, and I'm going to use them until I can replace them with something different. And that's sort of that's like a quiet firing exercise where they're like, I don't know what else to do except use CDK right now, but when I have an opportunity, I might switch to something else, even though it might be the same shit in a different pile. The wealth of data is staggering, right? Like the lack of, and I think you were just talking about this, Tim, the lack of activation on it, whether that's through, where do you start? Through marketing efforts, through personalization, through equity mining, through all of the things that data could be used for more effectively. It's just kind of sitting there and it's idle, right? If we're going to continue to use automotive analogies, it's sitting there. It might be in drive, but it's idling. And the fact that there could be so much more done, like that, simple things, like simple, obvious things, like, I don't know, let's reactivate, I think I said this last time, Ian, but let's rehire or reactivate the CRM we had before COVID, and let's actually just start, communicating with people, like they're people. Like, let's just email them once in a while and say, hey, here's the thing that's going on, and not beat them to death, with those offers. But also recognize, and I still love this example, I still get emails from a Nissan dealer here in Toronto that was great when I worked with them, but the car was demolished. I was hit by a deer, the car is gone, I still keep getting service. Come in for service. I'm like, the car is gone. We had this conversation. I've even asked you to stop, and you haven't stopped. So the depth, wealth, and opportunity with the data that is available at dealerships alone is a huge untapped resource. Stuff to do, not complicated. People just aren't doing it. I think there's a larger systemic reason for why that is. We could talk about that if you wanted to. And then it's even the whole problem, and this was a thing we tried to crack or talk a lot about at Google, but still made very little progress on. It's just the crust tier data that is siloed, that prevents a customer from having a pretty reasonable, comprehensive buying experience if they happen to walk into the same brand of a different dealership with the same brand somewhere else in the country, right? Like, there's just you knew that this would tweak my spidey sense when you emailed me, didn't you? You knew that I would be like, I would jump on a soapbox and start ranting, and that is kind of what's happened already.
Fantastic, thanks. So Mr. Falk, is it Falk?
I've been called worse.
Yeah, okay. That is great. And I think we talked a lot about it already. I know you're involved a little bit in the security side of stuff, but when you're getting answers like OEMs or dealers, how can they improve things? And I think Mr. Grady said this already, but it's we got all this data. It's cool. We like it. It's probably not as secure as it could be. Not to beat anyone up, but how do we get answers from that data? Like, how do we use it to our advantage?
So,
Securely.
you know, so yeah, I apologize. I realized after I introduced myself, I didn't actually ask your answer.
Yeah, that's okay. Go ahead.
So I apologize for that. But here's what I'll tell you. So, you know, Bontoc is a cybersecurity company. We work really heavily in banking, lending, insurance. Large investment firms use us, and it's all around the transport of data, of how to get things to and from consumers effectively and efficiently, and also do it in a way where it's accurate. And if you do it in a certain way, you know, it depends on the trueness of the data. Right. So garbage in, garbage out, kind of a scenario. And I got to tell you, so when the FTC safeguards rules first went into published before they went into play, we started getting calls from automotive dealers. And, you know, I bought cars over the years, several. I wanted to understand. So myself, I've been in easily over 200 dealerships in the last 2.5 years. And some of that was just we wanted to understand, and it was me and my team wanting to understand, like, where are the vulnerabilities, where are the challenges for the dealerships. And I think the unrenounding response from dealers is, I just want to sell the cars. I just want to sell cars, and I want to service them, right? All this other garbage, it gets in the way, and we see it sometimes in dealerships. They're like, you see the owner or the GM or GSM, or and it's just glossed over. They're like, I just want to sell cars, guys. So like Matthew said, I do believe that this was a little bit of a wake up what happened over the summer. Is not the only thing that will happen, and we're actually seeing an uptick in attacks at the dealership level. And I think one thing that the dealerships out of this, what happened over the summer with the outage, was, hey, that was my vendor. I can't really do anything about my vendor if they're exposed or whatever. And that's a little true, but we're now seeing that some dealerships are being attacked from a cybersecurity perspective, and we're seeing more of it because we're fielding questions, we're fielding conversations about that, and so a dealership has to think about, like, hey, if all their data was turned off, they had no access to anything, what would they do? And I think that that's an important question. And for any dealership that believes that I think what they have to do, I like to look at other vertical stories or things in automotive. And I think one of the things that's telling is, yes, everyone wants to sell cars. Everyone wants to service the cars, right? That's where the money's at for a dealership. But the wealth of data that they do have, assuming it's accurate, one, and assuming it's protected, two, I think Tesla is a great example of this. A lot of people think, hey, Tesla's just a car company. And they are. They sell great cars. But they're actually a data analytics company. They are absorbing so much data off of all their cars. And it's not just to have the data. They're actually making their vehicles better. They're making the driving experience better. They're making everything better. And they're using the data. So I think that's a great example of an example in automotive where if you have data, as long as it's accurate, you can mine the data in such a way, as long as you have the means to analyze it and process it and to actually make either the buying process better for the consumer or the service process better or their experience at the dealership better.
Interesting. Yeah, I would agree. I think that there's a massive amount of data. It's not being used. In a lot of cases, it's being siloed, and we talked about that before. But to Mr. Groden's point, I mean, at the end of the day, I still get offers from cars I haven't owned for years as well. And I think it's not just a misuse of resources. It's, update the data, right? And I think that's a multiple person problem, whereas the dealer doesn't update the data, and that's not pushed to the manufacturer. The manufacturer doesn't push it down. So there's a lot of issues there. But if you use the data effectively and it's clean data, I think you have a lot of opportunities there. Tim, what do you think?
Well, I mean, there's three directions I would go with what Carl just said, and what's being discussed here. What you just said. One thing, dealers more often than not, and I mean this with all the love in the world, believe they're being victimized by the FTC in state legislatures with data privacy laws, data governance laws, and cybersecurity laws, right? When in fact, it doesn't take too much diligence or audits or discovery to learn that retail automotive, like banks and credit unions, like hospitals and healthcare, like quite a few retailers, even though retailers have been able to move faster with the cloud and move faster with better data governance, artificial intelligence, all of the above, right? But you look at those three verticals, if we can, just for a hot second. These are the three verticals. If we look at healthcare, automotive, and financial services, if we'll call it that. They were the last ones to really move to the cloud. It's funny because that's where AI started years ago. The numbers are easy, right? It's when college students ask me what jobs are not going to be there when I get out, first thing I say is, anybody getting an accounting degree? The numbers were the easy part. Banks started it, but banks, hospitals, and car dealers were the last ones to really embrace the whole notion of digital transformation. And because they were, their technology stacks, the orchestra of systems that they have, which includes databases, which if you listen to a lot of the things we're talking about databases. They've left those things off to the peripheral. They've left them off to the side. They haven't integrated them. They haven't gone in and cleaned up the data. So they're in this pickle of a world where the notion of war has changed. There was, if anybody watched 60 Minutes over the course of the last month, there was a story on these groups that are starting to hire people in Myanmar and Cambodia that are the ones that are sending these social engineering texts every day now saying, hey, how you doing? Can you grab lunch tomorrow? Right? Those kinds of things. Not to mention sending you the emails that say, click here to get a $500 Starbucks card. These are all phishing attempts to get into systems so they can have that moment in the glory to get 100 people's credit card numbers or all the data and hold it for ransom, get the ransom paid and then sell it again on the dark web, right? Which is not pointing fingers and not mentioning any recent history or events that happened. I think, there's that. I think the thing that we really have to understand here too is I'm hearing a lot from dealers right now that want a backup of their data. And probably the biggest ransom in business today are these large systems, DMS systems, core systems in banks, and the core companies. I'll go ahead and say Oracle by name. What they've done with the apps and the platforms that they put into banks, and then not allowed the people who are paying for the platform, the people who paid to generate the data that lives in the platform, making them pay to get only some of the data via an API connection, right? This is probably why, unfortunately, we are in this moment right now where so many of these dealers, and I'll look to Carl for the cybersecurity nod on this, right? But it's a tough job to secure systems when they're not integrated, when they're all over the place, when the data hasn't been resolved and cleaned up, where you don't have unified records for everybody across that big sea of in dealers, at least it's 20, 30 systems. In banks, it's 50 to 150 systems, right? So at the end of the day, what I think we're going to see here is to I think the part that Matthew said was we've got a lot of folks who may have a little bit of a hangover from what just happened with CDK, but industry-wide, a lot of people who are just like, I want to just sell cars and I just want to keep moving on. And they're going to be the ones that I think are going to have to make a decision about what they do from a systems integration standpoint, what they do from a security standpoint, And better, the one thing none of us have talked about here is the investment in training and digital literacy. That right there is the longest last mile. You can hire a cybersecurity person to come in and help you build a wall around your fortress.
Right.
But 85% of the things that happen to you bad are going to be because somebody left the door open. They don't change their passwords. They haven't updated their operating system. They're not using multi-factor authentication, or they have bad days and they want to go home sick and they pull everything off the CRM on a thumb drive and go put it on their home computer. You know,
Yeah,
there's
Tim, a lot of this
there's
is,
all these things.
a lot of this is cultural. Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. A lot of this is cultural, and you have an industry that has, you know, I've read different, you know, reports, but 60 to 70% turnover every year.
Oh, higher
Right,
sometimes.
in between dealerships, and that will be a fundamental challenge for sure for all.
Yeah, anywhere between 60 and 80%, unless you happen to be female, that's as high as 90%.
Wow.
Believe it or not, it's a pretty scary statistic. But yeah, we've done shows on it, so you can definitely look through that. Look through the fear shows and the other shows around HR if you're HR or want to be in HR, because there's lots of content there. Matthew, what do you think? I mean, obviously we're talking about data risk already, so we might as well get into that. But when you look at security, consistency, compliance, all these things that, you know, the government's finally, I guess, rearing their head on, you know, data is obviously a challenge, but what do you think on the risk side? Like, how do you eliminate that?
Well, you can never eliminate it. You can just mitigate it.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the other thing. But I think I had this slide back during COVID where I said, you know, it was being used by other people across Google, and it was from finance, and it was a bit of one of those classic Google, like, blah blah blah, digital transformation, really important. So it's so important, it's not leaving, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But it was I don't know, Kinsey or Forrester, where it came from, but it was like one of those quotes, and it was cited as, you know, 90% of CIOs agree. And my follow-up to that was, you don't have a CIO.
Right.
And that's the problem, right? Like, the problem is within, you know, maybe within the auto group, maybe within an auto group, you have a CIO. A lot of them in Canada, no. A lot of them in the US, no. Standalone dealership, guaranteed they don't have anyone that's actually in charge of technology or that understands it. And, you know, even at the OEMs in Canada, they're regional sales and marketing offices, right? Like, so all of that responsibility falls on somebody else in some other part of the world. So whether that's Detroit and Dearborn, or, you know, Tokyo and Seoul, or Munich, like, the responsibility is very far away from the activation. And that creates a problem, because it gets really hard to exert that kind of control. And then you have the fragmentation between tiers, where even the CIO, well, you have maybe, you know, you have an OEM, that OEM has someone who's very much in charge and responsible for data and data responsibility and protection. And the, you know, your dealer in the wild is basically like, please go fuck yourself. Like, it's just like, and so in that combination, there's a glaring hole. Like, there's just a glaring hole of things that shouldn't exist, things that don't exist. And, you know, I'm sure you've crossed this path, Carl, that the automotive folk hate the Tesla example. Like, so much, it's a weird, like, knee jerk. They won't even believe, they don't want to believe that what Tesla makes is cars. And the first thing they will tell you is that they suck.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, they made 2 million of them last year and sold them, but they suck. And the panels, it's all about the panel gaps. There's actually a Tesla around the corner. The license plate is panel gap. That's what the license plate is. Yeah. So he's yeah. So it's a large systemic problem that is going to be very hard to wrap anyone's, you know, pick an analogy, hands, arms, legs, entire body around, because there is no CIO, because there isn't someone with that responsibility. No one feels it's their responsibility, and organizationally, the dealership is just, they're stuck in the 30-day flywheel. Like, they're stuck in the 30-day flywheel, and if it doesn't impact materially the 30-day flywheel, it doesn't exist.
Right.
So to think about initiating a project to be like, oh, what we're going to do is actually spend money, time, resources, and educate our staff on data security and do an audit and make a cloud choice, like do all of the things that you would do if that was your job as CIO of the organization. They just don't happen. Like, it just doesn't exist. And that is what created, and then you add to that I was trying to explain the CDK situation to my wife, who A, is not technical, and B, doesn't give much of a fuck about automotive. And so you can imagine how that conversation went. But she was like, well, and she, even in her understanding, she was like, shouldn't like the company have been able to solve this problem? I'm like, well, they had exposure everywhere. Like, they had exposure kind of everywhere. It wasn't just the CDK's problem. And it's actually Brookfield. Brookfield owns CDK. Like, Brookfield's sort of like, crap, we have a multi-billion-dollar exposure here in this thing we bought a few years ago. What do we do?
Right.
So it's not easily solved, but it is kind of the exercise of, and what I've said to a lot of dealer folk at meetings and conferences is, start by making sure you have somebody that's in charge of that. Like, start by make sure there's someone in charge of that. And if there isn't, go hire that person, even if it's on a fractional basis. And then build a fucking plan that gets rid of the 30-day flywheel to actually execute on something that takes longer than 30 days.
Well, Matthew, real quick, I just about the 30-day flywheel. The 30-day flywheel has the dealer principal, the general manager, anybody who's in the hierarchy of management, has them on what they believe is a position of control.
Right.
Which I think the translation that I'm hearing, right, and I hear this often. I haven't tried it yet. So this show, thank you, Ian, for bringing us together. It's things I've heard Carl say, and it's things I've heard Matthew say. But how do dealers start to embrace and transfer that same attention to control to their systems, right? To their data. If they could think of it that way, if they could think of being in absolute control of their entire business, right? And quit separating, because it's not just selling cars and what I have to do with Meta and Google, right?
Yes, of course.
Which is where 80% of the spend goes. It's not just that. It is their opportunity right now to take total control.
The thing I said, so I did a presentation back at May or June, and there was a lot like this thread, a lot of this type of conversation, and some other things, because I wanted to be provocative. And no one can fire me now. Like, now I can't be fired. I can just say whatever the fuck I want. And so, which was not the case at Google. I could have been fired. At the end of it, after a lot of provocative statements, one of the dealers was like, what do we do? Like, what is the one thing? I'm like, that's hard. Like, there isn't a one thing here. There's a lot of things. But I'm like, the one thing challenge I threw back at them was, what does your annual plan say? And of course, they looked at me with dead eyes, because I'm like, wait, you don't have one? You don't have an annual plan, right? You've got some numbers in a spreadsheet that the OEM gave you, and you kind of split it up, and maybe you give that to the GSM, but you don't have an annual plan. If you don't have an annual plan, nothing gets done. Like, if you don't have an annual plan that's broken down into things we're going to accomplish, who's responsible for that over the quarters, like any operational business that might make hundreds of millions of dollars a year, then you don't have a mechanism to know if you did the things, or you don't have a mechanism to get the things done. And so it sounds like, feel like we need, this kind of exists, it doesn't exist. We need dealer MBA school to basically say, build a plan, execute the plan, hire the people you need to execute the plan, and then you can protect your business and your data.
Yeah, we always refer to it, again, military references, but you got 1 meter targets, 5 meter targets, and 20 meter targets, right? And you got to focus on them all. Obviously, if you don't focus on the 1 meter targets, you're going to get killed. But pretty soon, the 5 meter targets become 1 meter targets, right? So the more you can look downfield and focus on those things. So like the cybersecurity policies, procedures, how are we training our people, right? Again, those don't really, those aren't really, the 1 meter target today. But when the shit hits the fan, sure enough, they're 1 meter targets. And now you're sitting back going, okay, well, I got to get back to selling cars. I'll focus on that later. And I think that's right. What you said, Matthew, is, again, the guys, everyone just wants to sell the cars and service the cars and make money. But at the end of the day, we realize if we're not focusing, the dealerships are focused on those 5 meter targets, they can be shut down, right? And say, hey, we can't do business right now, or we've got to go back to paperwork.
I like that analogy a lot, but I'll give you another one that's fun, that one of our data evangelists started using at Google. I don't work there anymore, but he's still there. And it was imagine you're in the woods and you're in a campground and you're being chased by a bear. You don't need to be faster than the bear. You just need to be faster than the other campers.
Yeah. Always the truth.
Right. So this is one of those situations where you don't need to be faster than the absolute worst case scenario, being hacked. And in some regards, hopefully, ideally, an individual dealer in a medium, small size auto group, certainly in Canada, probably not a huge target. Auto groups in the US, a different story. But it gives you some time, right? Like this year should have been a wake up call and should have led people to be like, okay, so what is our plan for data protection? What do we do?
Well, and
it's only August. And it's only August. Okay.
And it's only August. That's right.
Yeah.
I think one thing that was an eye opener. We talked about this in a couple of NADA webinars, and I think it was a big eye opener for a lot of people. And even with our banking clients, healthcare, et cetera, we talk about this all the time. Is everyone has their panties in a wad over the FTC, right? And they're pissed off. Say, you're going to fine me, and everyone hates them. What really happened was the U.S. government said they came to the conclusion. They said we can no longer protect the U.S. consumer against cybercrime.
No.
And the stat that I love, you can always throw out billion this, trillion this, or whatever. The stat that I love is cybercrime is now more profitable than all the global drug trade combined.
Right.
Yep.
So put that perspective on, and now you know what's happening. If I was a Cuban drug lord, I would be well diversified into cybercrime, right? There's less bullets flying at me, and it can be done remote. So this is why you see big groups like the one that attacked CDK.
Are you telling me that drug dealers learned about remote work during COVID?
COVID did a lot for the world. Yes.
Yeah.
A little bit of an impact on the distribution business.
I hadn't thought of that.
This is the realization. So this is why the government has basically said, like, we can't protect the U.S. consumer anymore. We have to push on industry to do things. And I think that's the realization that every business has to come to terms with is, okay, there's a risk of getting, Matthew, you talked about risk, and you can't get rid of all risk, but you've got a risk of potentially being fined if you're not going to do it. And there's some people who say, screw it, I'm not going to do it. But then there's the other risk of potentially exposing their consumer information, which is a huge brand risk potentially to any business. And then you've got the other potential risk of actually shutting down your business. Right. So it's kind of like if you don't want to get in line, you're going to face one or all of those items.
That makes sense. So now that we've talked about, I guess, the danger, Will Robinson, and how you should probably have a plan and, I don't know how to fight back or know how to run, or both. What's the good side of it if you're doing these things properly? Like that, we're missing it because we're not paying attention. But what's the good side of it? I mean, what?
If you found someone who's doing it properly, could you point them out? That would be great. I would love to talk to them.
I think there are some OEMs, shockingly, that are doing things in novel ways. I don't have an example per se, but I would say Tesla's a good one, but probably Lucid and others are in that same camp just because of the the scale of the operation. But it's also possible brands like BYD might be in that category.
It's the new entrants.
Yeah.
You've got Tesla, you've got the other startups who've learned the game plan from Tesla. And you have maybe half of the Chinese brands who are wash, rinse, repeating that same model globally. And maybe somewhere in there, small pieces, Genesis.
Hey, would you mind if I jumped in real quick?
Yeah, go ahead, Larry. The most data centric person I know. Go ahead, Larry.
Oh, Larry.
Have at it, Larry.
Well, hey guys. Well, a couple of things. I just signed up a dealer group in Delaware, so I'm driving back, and I caught a little bit of what Matt said. So 2 thoughts, and what the gentleman was saying in terms of military planning. As far as what Matt said, I'd still be careful about saying what you want, not getting fired. Because that's what Joe Biden thought would happen to him. That didn't work out too good.
He
for
still
him.
had a job.
Maybe
He
better
still.
for my country.
I'm not going into politics, Larry.
Wherever you go in the graph, will be Joe Biden. Now, as far as the military, long-term thinking is what makes you wealthy and healthy and all those good things. But I got to tell you, most dealers, if they didn't have short-term thinking, they wouldn't have any thinking at all. You know, everybody talks a good game about what they're plotting and they're planning, but I'm in these stores and I still don't see a whole lot of walkarounds. I don't see a lot of role playing. I don't see people doing service walks. It's mandatory. So while you guys are all forward thinking, Ian's as sharp as they come, and I'd like to believe my brain is still functioning at some capacity. But I like to think long term. How can you keep people happy? How can you get them back? How can you engage them so you'll make more money on them? But I got to tell you, a lot of these dealers, it's almost like they get up in the morning and say, what can I do to not be successful? And I know that sounds insane. I'm seeing it all the time.
Yeah. Right. No, Larry, we've talked about this a couple of times, but I mean, that's, you know, and I'm trying to provide a direct answer to what Ian just asked too, is, you know, it's dealers are on that 30-day flywheel again that we talked about a few minutes ago. You know, they're all about more units within a certain amount of time, right? They're just about that. They're not about the fact that they've got a body of work here. They've got that's what that data is it's a body of work that can yield all kinds of good things. It can help them understand the behavior and the preferences, the wants and needs, to something you had suggested earlier, Matthew, is understand what it's like just to send a simple questionnaire out to everybody who's bought from you or who everybody just did a test drive from you, right? Just send a couple of questions out to them. Be very directional about those questions. Bring those answers back, right? And then let's look at ways that we can leverage that in terms of contemporary CRM technology or the things that are happening on the customer data platform or the master data management.
But Tim, that has to fall into the category of being willing to follow up and doing it gladly, not like it's a task, because you're finding out what motivated people and what pissed them off. It's like every dealership, the salespeople complain there's no business, but they don't go into the orphan files and they're not in service 7 o'clock in the morning with donuts. You know, it's just crazy. I mean, I met a guy on LinkedIn. He said I might be interested. I got my ass in the car. I went down to Delaware. I signed him up. Was that complicated? And he said, if I pay the initial thing, how do I know I'm going to get somebody? He says, because I don't want your initial payment. I want all your money.
Right.
That's your thinking. If long term, you know, you got my book, Tim. I quote myself. They're not annoyances. They're annuities. These people, unless they're the Unabomber living in a cave, they got friends, they got family. They can be your best salespeople. And unless you're in Ohio, in Virginia, or California, in my states, you can write a $100 check to somebody, and everybody wants that 100 for the referral fee. Rich people drive families across town that save 3 cents on a gallon or liter of gas.
Yeah. Keep your eyes on the road, Larry. But yes. Yes.
Yeah, so I think that's good with the good side. Go ahead. Sorry.
What you just said, though, this is what the whole idea about personalization and empathy is all about, right? This is what it is all about. It's about anybody who's been exposed to your brand, anybody who's bought from you in the past has got this magnificent power to influence others through planes, trains, and T-ball games, right? They have an opportunity to go tell everybody they know why they bought from you and why they're going to buy from you again. And guess what? They can start to bring people to you. But that to the point you're making, Larry, everybody else, especially if their title is Internet Sales Director, doesn't understand that side of the relationships. They think that Meta and Google, or Facebook specifically, now Instagram, is going to be the broker of that relationship, which is bullshit, right?
Tim, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
You're 100 times sharper than me with tech stuff, and probably everybody on this show is better than I am at AI. The one thing AI can't do is it can't empathize with somebody. It can't shake somebody's hand. It can't smile at them. So you and me always talk about this. If we can wed the technical advances that we have, hey, I'm on a Zoom call in my car, okay? With being human, smiling at people. The guys I just left, Tim, said, man, you're a lot of fun. These are 2 service directors. I didn't go in with a bunch of bullshit and terms and algorithms. I made them like me. And it's hard for a computer to do that. But it's pretty easy for a computer to piss you off if you're on hold for 9 different prompts and then you get hung up on. Or the computer, nobody changed the information and they keep sending, rebate forms to your dead mother.
Well, hey, Larry, I like this is the first time we met. I love your energy and your perspective.
Well, hold on, be careful. I gotta give you a warning. Ian makes me say it. I did get checked out, and I am not mentally unstable, but apparently I'm a carrier of mental instability. So be careful. Go ahead.
That's good. I think this world needs more of that. But one thing that I totally spaced what I was going to say, but from our perspective, what people I think what people are actually selling today is not to use technology to replace the business. And really, technology should be used to augment businesses, right? So that
let me tell you something. You're 100% right, but let me show you. I'm going to sound like old school guy. It's always been a crutch. I remember when I first got to the dealership that I worked at, that I wound up owning, guys would get a printout from the computer. How old shit does it sound? And they'd have the inventory. And when somebody would ask about a car, instead of walking them out, they'd pull the inventory sheet out of their back pocket.
Right.
So even then, it was the crutch of, here's something that I don't have to do as a human, where you may say, wait a minute, what's that blue one over there? So to make it easier, to make it low-hanging fruit that you can hit a button, and articulate what you're trying to say. I don't know. It's like giving kids calculators, and none of these kids younger than us can add and subtract.
Yeah.
Right. Wait till you give them a slide rule. Yeah. Yeah. I think, and I think this goes for any business, and I think Amazon is a great example. And I think I'm a good example because I'm a cheap bastard. Actually, sorry, Ricky. Ricky's listening. She's our marketing. I have to say I'm frugal, but I don't like spending money. But I will hit a button.
No. Ricky just texted me. She says, indeed, you are a cheap bastard.
Oh, so all right. But I'll tell you what, I'll hit that buy now button on Amazon and spend a couple bucks more, so I don't have to get in my car and drive around and try and find it.
Amen.
And I enjoy driving. So I think
Wait
that's.
a minute, hold on. You just said, I don't mean to interrupt. You just said gold. You buy from these people because it's convenient. But look how inconvenient we make buying a car. What's your credit like? I don't have the blue one.
Amen. Absolutely. And I think that's what the today's consumer is craving. And it's not, a lot of people use the word convenience. What Amazon actually sells, and the reason they're super profitable, is they sell people time back in their day. That's what Amazon sells me. And I think if more companies, and I'll throw dealerships in there too, really thought about that, how do I sell my customer? How do I get them in and out of if they want to buy, how do I get them to buy? And they don't have to sit there for 2 hours.
How old are you?
This is my last year in my 40s.
But the only reason I'm asking is I ain't that old, and I remember when my mother made dinner every night. The idea of going to a fast food place, my mother would have said, what are you, crazy? I'm making dinner. But all of a sudden, we got busier as society, and people started going to McDonald's. I mean, the only people really happy about McDonald's are the heart doctors, because that cholesterol puts you right on their table pretty quickly. But it's convenient.
It is not, and I'd say it is not the best hamburger, but people buy it because it's predictable and it's easy.
Larry, what I just learned.
Yeah, predictable consistency, same thing, right? Yeah.
Larry, what I just learned is even your mother called you crazy.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at consistency and time, and you look at data, and you look at experience, and we've had many shows on it, the biggest challenge, I think, in automotive at any level is the time it takes. And I think that's where everyone's chasing, whether it be Tesla or digital retail products or even OEMs or even data centric. It's how can I make this secure, easy, and customizable? I mean, I think that's really what it comes down to when you're looking at data, is how can I make it secure, but also useful and also improve profitability in the customer experience. We are running out of time, so I got a couple minutes for final thoughts. Let's go with Tim.
Well, I mean, we've mentioned Tesla a couple times, right? We need to remind ourselves that they also, the same group of folks also own Starlink, which is connected to a little more than 2.8 million homes right now. They see everything, the data that comes in and out of those homes. And of course, when that same group of folks, or a mix of that same group of folks, bought Twitter, they did not buy a social network. They bought 17 years of human thought. They bought all the data that was swimming through Twitter. We have Grok now, right? We have Dojo as a supercomputer that all the cars are connected to. There's something bigger happening there, and it's not any different than what Amazon's doing. It's not any different than what Google wants to do and what Meta thinks they can do. And I think the bottom line is this pivotal moment, when you think about the data you have, and I'm talking to the listener here, when you think about the data that's living in the server in the closet, that's in your DMS, that's in your CRM, your marketing automation system, anything you're using for equity mining or parts inventory management, all the data you have right now is your ticket to take control. It is your ticket to watch how so much of your expenses shouldn't go out to any of the companies I just mentioned. And not all of it shouldn't. It should stay in-house for you to leverage the intelligence that you have there today, both with your humans and with your systems. That's what the big opportunity is here, taking control.
Thanks for that. Carl?
Yeah, so yeah, it was great, Tim. I agree 100%. I think data, cash is king, as everybody knows, but data it sure is becoming king as well. And there's a gold mine there. I think if I was a dealership, I've got all these things that I'm trying to process: cybersecurity, my data, whether it's in transit or at rest. How do I capitalize on it? How do I make my sales staff and my service staff more efficient? How do I sell my customers time? Right? I think everyone's like, I got to get service. Well, is it easier to take it to the dealership, or I got XYZ oil change here right around the corner? How do we sell our customers time back? And I think data can be a crux of that. We have a rule inside of our company, and I think this is a great for any company, is if you as the employee or leadership or whatever are doing the same thing 10 times, more than 10 times, it can be automated. You may not know how, but it can be automated. Not to get rid of, hey, we sell 10 cars. No, okay, you're not going to automate the full process, but there's pieces in there. Hey, how do we automate this? How do we automate this? And sometimes that's, hey, what data do we have? And sometimes the data question isn't technology. Sometimes it's legal. Other things. So, when I was in the military, we did a huge project of merging a bunch of data between Singapore, the U.S., Coast Guard, all maritime information, and it wasn't a technological challenge. It was, how do you keep stuff at different classification levels and partners and all that. So I think there's also a great article that came out. I want to at least leave this. It's in Automotive News this week regarding the CDK and Asbury, question about who owns data and whatever. And I encourage everybody to go read it, because I think and I'm not citing either way. I'm just saying that it's in Automotive News, and I think it's a great article. And I think dealerships have to understand that data is important. They also have to understand what they can do with their data, who owns the data, and et cetera. And I think that's going to be more and more of something that comes up in the future is where's my data, who has it, who owns it, does the OEM own it, do I own it, does my software provider own it? So I encourage everybody to focus on that as well, because that will become more and more intently important in the future.
Thanks for that. Mr. Groden, any final thoughts?
My final thought is probably simply that folk at dealership need to understand that they collect first-party data, and when they do that, they're responsible for it. Right? Like that is like as fundamental as it gets. They take PII, personally identifiable information, financial information from a consumer, and once they do that, as a business, whether they're wherever they are in the world, they're subject to some set of laws that mean they're responsible for that data. And then it becomes a question of, once you absorb that thought, what do you do, right? Like, how do you protect it? How do you use it? How do you make better use of it to sell more cars, have a better experience for your customers? And that comes down to a classic kind of, big tech trope. Google uses it all the time, that don't let perfection be the enemy of good or better, right? Find a way to make it better. And so understand you have a responsibility to that data, and then figure out how to make it work for you, how to make it better.
Thanks for that. Larry, any final thoughts on the move?
Yep. It was a pleasure meeting everybody. Carl, if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, it's Larry Feldman. It'd be a pleasure to have you as a connection. Tim, Troy called me on the way down, and I'm going to reach out to the dealership I was at for the last 2 weeks and try to convey the wonderful things you're doing with your company.
Awesome. Thank you, Larry. Appreciate all you do, and appreciate you, brother. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
It was a pleasure being on the show.
All right. Thanks. Have a great week. Here we go.